Welcome to the McAnulty Method, where financial expert Frank McAnulty and Colin Sorrell share their knowledge and insight with us and answer our questions about finance and how we might live a better financial life. Hi, guys. Welcome.
How you
I
doing?
know.
Doing better now.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Uh, we've gotten a lot of questions from people asking about the housing market. Is this the right time to buy a house? So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, I want to flip that question a little bit. Is it the right time for you to buy a house? Because everybody's situation is different. And there is a saying that the time to buy real estate is when you can, regardless of what the prices are, because you just get it when you can. And to a certain extent, that makes sense. But let's say, we're trying to gear this more towards a younger crowd. What if you're not completely sure of your job situation, where you're going to be working, where you're going to land for a few years? How's long-term investment? And especially, in California and a lot of it's sure. So this could be the top of the market today, right? But if you buy it and you're planning on sticking around and you're going to be here 5, 7 years, doesn't matter. It can go down 20%, 30% over the weekend. And 7 years from now, it's going to be up 30, 40% from where you bought it. So I think it's more of a question of how long are you going to be in the house? What's your situation? And yes, no one can tell the future. Things could always change. But that's the number one thing. If you think you're going to be in the same area, you want to be in the same area, yes. If you can get in, if you can buy a house, buy it. Because the only thing that happens when you wait usually is it gets more expensive because we're not that good at guessing when the market's going to go down. It's always, oh, it's going to go down. It's too expensive. And you next thing you know, oh shoot, they went up $100,000.
Well, I like that you say when's the right time for you to buy a home, but I prefer when can you afford the home? Because you see a lot of people, you don't want to get into a home if you can just buy it. There's a difference between being able to buy it and being able to afford it. And I think individually sometimes we try to rush into I got to get it now, I got to get it now, I got to get it now, and you might find yourself getting in trouble in other areas if we want to talk about being able to afford the home more so than
Well,
buy it.
well, that's absolutely true. You don't want to be house poor,
And I
where
love that you
every
call it house poor because I always called it cash poor because you're always cash strapped. But uh, I'm never gonna learn to say house poor. But go ahead,
well, no,
explain.
that you're poor because you're spending all your money on your house.
Right.
The guideline that was always used for buying a house was that your your mortgage, taxes, and insurance shouldn't be more than a third of your income, your gross income. So let's say you make $10,000 a month, so your payment for the mortgage, taxes, insurance should have been $3,333 a month. Now, that's adjusted slightly because of how expensive things have gotten, but it's not much more than 40%. So you're talking 4,000 out of 10,000 that you should pay on the house. And then also, what other debts do you have? It, we don't all know. We all hear about these horrible student loans and other things. But you're absolutely right, Colin. You don't want to just buy it to buy it, and then you can't afford to keep it.
Well, and to that point, you're talking about, um, your insurance, your mortgage payments, property tax. That's something nobody used to think about. It was like this afterthought when homes were $200,000. Well, now 0.73% or whatever it is in California, that's a big deal on $1 million home. That's not
Well,
chump
Colin,
change anymore.
in California, it's a minimum of 1.2% on the purchase price.
Ugh,
So on that $1 million home, you're talking about $1,000 a month more for property taxes.
yeah. Well,
So
and
that's 12,000 a year.
right, and you talk about, it should never be over 40%, or, I mean, it really shouldn't be over a third, but, let's just use a third because it makes the math easier. you make 10 grand a month. If you're making 10 grand a month, people think you're doing pretty well, but a 3,300 bill all in is probably a home that only costs you four or $500,000 to get. Where are you going to get a home like that in California these days?
That's why they invented Riverside.
Right. That's funny.
But
Well,
no,
I'd
you're
like to ask, so my sort of baseline, right? The way it was always taught to me in traditional, if you're trying to buy something, what's the difference between buying and affording it? But if it's $1,000 and you have $1,000, you can buy it. The rule for affording it is, you should have twice that. You should have 2,000, so you can buy the 1,000, still have 1,000 left over. It works a little different in housing because it's not realistic that you're going to have $400,000 saved up and can afford a down payment or whatever. But, my sort of the general rule I came up with is you should be able to make the down payment and make your monthly payments for at least 6 months if you didn't work a day in that time. What are your thoughts about where should you be when you say I can afford this?
Well, that is a good point because as Bill and I know, something's going to go wrong with the house, and you no longer have a landlord. You are the landlord.
Right.
So if there's a plumbing problem, you have to fix it. It needs to be painted. You got to get it painted. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You shouldn't say, well, I can pay this much, but if I go $1 over, I'm going to go broke. Well, as somebody once told somebody I knew when they were sitting there in the sales center trying to buy a house, and they kept, every time they talk about something, they type it into the calculator. Well, my payment's going to go up this. My payment's going to be this. The salesman looked at me and goes, look, if a $10 difference in the payment is stressing you out this much, don't buy the house, because there's going to be things happen. If you're that tight, yeah, you really shouldn't, because that's where you get in a lot of trouble. But what's rent these days?
What do you get in
Yeah.
the studio? And where are you, Riverside?
Well, but see, that's the difference. And some people are very happy renting. Look at places like New York and Chicago, where the big cities where people love. They've never thought of buying. They're just going to rent. They're happy. They're happy to have to call up a landlord and say, "Hey, this is broken. Come fix it." I think it all depends on what you want. If you're, I heard it described the other day as you're paying for a backyard.
Uh-huh.
When you buy a house, you're paying for a backyard. I thought, to a certain extent, that's true. If you could have the world's nicest apartment, you still don't have a backyard. May have a little patio or something, but it's like, how much are you willing to pay
For
to
a
have a
pool.
backyard? And so, once again, I think it truly comes down to a personal decision. Yes, as you both know, I believe that real estate is one of the great ways to become wealthy in this country. And even if, let's look at it another way. Say you don't know what you're going to be doing in 2 years or 3 years, but you're doing fairly well. There's nothing wrong with buying a house and then saying, well, I need to move. Maybe I can rent the house out. Now I've got a rental problem. So you gotten into the rental market, the back door. It wasn't planned, but it's like, hey, I got this out. I don't want to sell it. I can get rent. It can pay for itself. Let's do it.
It's that's a great idea, and a friend of mine did just that, and he's actually making enough money on the rental of the house he bought that he now has a place beachfront. So he's using the money from his house to pay rent to someone else. So he lives in a place he likes much better. So win-win.
Oh, especially with interest rates as low as they are. You get yourself a low fixed payment, you could probably charge more for rent than what your mortgage is.
Well,
Absolutely.
That's the key. You want to tie up these mortgage rates right now. They're not changing for 30 years once you get them.
Well, that sounds like that sounds like maybe for our next edition here, our next video, we can talk about how people, especially young people who may not have a ton of money right now, can get into that first house and start building a wealth.
That sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you guys. And we will see you next time. If you have a question for Frank and Colin, please put it in the comments below and we'll get to it.